In the quiet suburbs of Ohio, a tragic story unfolded that shook the community to its core. Ethan Reed, a 12-year-old boy with so much potential, found himself spiraling down a dark and dangerous path. After falling in with the wrong crowd, his life began to unravel through substance abuse and growing tension at home. This is the heartbreaking story of Ethan Reed, how addiction and bad choices led to an unthinkable tragedy. Ethan Reed's childhood, like that of many children, was initially marked by curiosity and promise. He was a bright boy with an inquisitive mind, eager to learn and explore the world around him. His early years were filled with the typical joys of youth, playing outside, attending school, and forming friendships. However, beneath this veneer of normalcy lay vulnerabilities that would soon make him susceptible to dangerous influences. In a community that had its share of challenges and risks, Ethan's desire to belong and be accepted opened a door to a darker world. At the tender age of 12, an age when most children are still navigating the innocence of childhood, Ethan began to drift toward a group of peers whose behavior was far from benign. This group was known locally for their risky activities, frequent trouble with authority, and involvement in drug use. The allure of belonging to such a group, especially for a boy grappling with feelings of isolation or inadequacy, proved irresistible. Ethan's need to fit in and be accepted became a powerful force that overshadowed caution and the wisdom of youth. The friends Ethan chose were not merely companions for casual play or schoolwork. They were gateways to a lifestyle filled with danger and deception. They introduced him to substances, drugs that promised an escape from the pressures and realities that weighed heavily on him. At first, these substances might have seemed like a curious experiment or a way to numb discomfort. However, the impact was immediate and profound. What started as a tentative step soon became a dependency, a grip that tightened with each use, pulling Ethan deeper into a world where danger lurked at every turn. The introduction to drugs was more than just a physical addiction. It was an emotional and psychological descent. The substances offered a temporary refuge, a way to drown out the pain, confusion, and fears that Ethan was unable to articulate. In these fleeting moments of altered consciousness, the harshness of his reality seemed to fade, replaced by a false sense of peace or excitement. This illusion of relief, however, was short-lived and came at a devastating cost. Ethan's life began to revolve around this new addiction. The substances dictated his choices, his relationships, and his behaviors. School, once a place of learning and socialization, became a distant memory. Classes were skipped, assignments left undone, and teachers' concerns went unheeded. The boy who had once shown promise now drifted aimlessly, caught in a cycle of craving and withdrawal, his days marked by secrecy and his nights by restless searches for the next escape. His family, particularly his parents Mark and Linda Reed, watched with growing concern and helplessness. They witnessed the transformation in their son, the withdrawal, the mood swings, the increasing defiance. Yet their love and efforts to intervene were met with resistance, anger, and denial. The gap between Ethan and his family widened, filled with unspoken fears and mounting frustrations. The safe haven that should have been a source of strength for him became a place of tension and mistrust. Ethan's peers who continued on the path of drug use reinforced his downward spiral. The camaraderie he found in this dangerous circle was built on shared habits and mutual dependency, rather than genuine support or care. In this environment, the behaviors that might have been cause for alarm to outsiders were normalized. The risks, the broken promises, the consequences all faded into the background as the group's shared identity centered on the very habits that were destroying them. As his addiction grew, so did Ethan's isolation from the world outside this harmful circle. Friends from school, neighbors, and even extended family saw less and less of the boy he once was. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a haunted look born from confusion, fear, and helplessness. His potential, once so evident, became obscured by the fog of addiction and the relentless pursuit of escape. The need for acceptance, a fundamental human desire, had become the very force leading Ethan toward destruction. His search for belonging and understanding was tragically misguided, steering him into a place where his health, future, and very life were at risk. The substances that once seemed to offer relief only tightened their grip, making escape from the cycle more and more difficult. This early period of Ethan's descent into addiction illustrates the complex interplay between vulnerability, peer influence, and the search for identity that many young people face. It highlights how easily a promising life can be derailed when protective factors are lacking and risky behaviors become appealing alternatives to pain or loneliness. Ethan Reed's story is a stark reminder of the fragility of youth and the importance of early recognition and intervention. It underscores the need for communities, schools, and families to create environments where children feel valued, supported, and understood, where they can resist the allure of dangerous influences and find healthier ways to cope with their struggles. This chapter of Ethan's life is not just a cautionary tale. It is a call to action. It urges us to look closely at the factors that contribute to youth vulnerability and addiction, to foster open communication, and to provide the resources necessary to guide children back to safer paths. The promise of a child like Ethan, bright and curious, should never be lost to the shadows of addiction and despair. As Ethan's addiction deepened, the once warm and supportive atmosphere in the Reed household began to deteriorate. The steady rhythm of family life gave way to a relentless cycle of tension and conflict. Every day seemed to bring fresh arguments between Ethan and his parents, Mark and Linda, with drug use and his repeated absences from school at the heart of their disputes. What had started as small concerns evolved into major fractures, threatening to tear apart the family unit they had once cherished. Mark and Linda, both hardworking and devoted, watched helplessly as their son withdrew further into himself. Mark, who labored long hours in a physically demanding job, returned home weary but determined to protect and guide his family. Linda, balancing the demands of her teaching career with the emotional toll of caring for Ethan, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, even as the ground beneath them seemed to shift. Their days were consumed by worry, and their nights often ended in bitter confrontations, punctuated by raised voices and slammed doors. The love they felt for Ethan was undeniable, but it was increasingly overshadowed by frustration and despair. Ethan, once a vibrant and curious boy, now became a shadow of himself. His absences from school grew more frequent, eventually turning into habitual truancy. Teachers noted his decline, marking him absent day after day, and expressed concern to his parents. But by then, the damage was already deep. Isolated from his peers and overwhelmed by the weight of addiction, Ethan retreated into a lonely existence. He spent more time away from the home, lost in the company of friends who encouraged his drug use rather than helping him find a way out. The boy who had once dreamed of a bright future now seemed trapped in a downward spiral with no clear escape. Attempts by Mark and Linda to intervene were met with resistance that only deepened the rift between them. Conversations meant to reach Ethan often devolved into shouting matches, with accusations and blame thrown from all sides. Ethan's defiance was fueled not only by addiction but by a deep well of anger at himself, at his parents, and at the world that seemed to offer him no refuge. His responses were sharp and dismissive, pushing away those who sought to help, intensifying the family's isolation. The home, once a refuge, had become a battleground. The strain extended beyond verbal conflict. Mark and Linda found themselves walking on eggshells, unsure how to engage without triggering an outburst. Their exhaustion was palpable, as was their sense of helplessness. They sought advice from counselors and community resources, but the solutions seemed elusive. The complexity of adolescent addiction and the emotional turmoil that accompanied it made every step forward difficult and fraught with setbacks. Family routines fractured under the weight of mistrust and pain. Meals were eaten in silence or in anger. Once interacted activities faded into memories. The emotional distance grew wider with each passing day. Despite their efforts, Mark and Linda were unable to break through the walls Ethan had built around himself. Their relationship, once defined by warmth and connection, became strained and tenuous. They feared losing him, not just to addiction, but to a path that could lead to even darker outcomes. The community around the Reeds noticed the changes as well. Friends and neighbors whispered with concern, unsure how to intervene or offer support without overstepping boundaries. School officials expressed worry but were limited in their ability to enforce attendance or provide direct intervention. The lack of a coordinated support system left the family vulnerable, navigating the crisis largely on their own. Ethan's growing isolation was both a symptom and a cause of the escalating conflict. Cut off from positive influences and overwhelmed by his struggles, he became increasingly alienated. The addiction blurred his ability to see a way out, and the fractures at home removed the safety nets that might have caught him. This combination created a volatile environment where pain, anger, and despair simmered just beneath the surface, waiting to erupt. The breakdown of the Reed family dynamic was a tragic evolution of what could have been prevented with early intervention and effective support. The arguments, missed school days, and withdrawal were all warning signs that went unheeded for too long. The family story serves as a poignant example of the challenges faced by many families grappling with adolescent addiction, the emotional toll, the struggle to communicate, and the urgent need for compassion and understanding. In retrospect, every fight, every moment of silence, every plea for change was a chapter in a story of mounting desperation. The love Mark and Linda had for their son was never in doubt, but love alone could not undo the damage. Their efforts to save Ethan were hindered by the very nature of addiction and the fierce resistance it often breeds. The family's experience underscores the crucial importance of accessible resources, mental health care, and community support in helping young people and their families navigate such crises. This period of deterioration was not just a personal tragedy. It was a reflection of broader societal challenges surrounding youth addiction, mental health, and family support systems. The Reed family's struggle highlights the need for increased awareness and proactive measures to identify and assist at-risk youth before conflicts escalate beyond repair. As the tension within the Mason household grew, it became increasingly clear that time was running out. The combination of addiction-fueled defiance, fractured relationships, and lack of intervention created a perfect storm. The family's unraveling was a powerful reminder of how addiction can infiltrate and devastate even the closest of bonds, turning love and concern into pain and fear. Ultimately, the story of Ethan Reed and his parents during this dark chapter is a cautionary tale. It challenges us to recognize the signs of youth addiction and familial strain early, to break down the barriers of stigma and isolation, and to provide comprehensive support systems that address both the individual and the family as a whole. It is a call to action for communities, schools, and mental health providers to come together to prevent such heartbreaking spirals from ever taking hold again. One tragic night, the quiet suburb of Ohio was shattered by a darkness no one could have imagined. Ethan Reed, a boy of only 12 years, found himself overwhelmed by a storm brewing inside. A storm fueled by addiction, confusion, and despair. That evening marked a devastating turning point, a moment when the fragile grip Ethan had on his life slipped entirely, plunging him into a nightmarish reality that would leave an indelible mark on his family and community. Leading up to that night, Ethan's behavior had become increasingly erratic. The substances he had been using for months, meant as an escape from his pain, began to control him rather than the other way around. The haze of intoxication clouded his mind, blurring the lines between reality and hallucination, reason and rage. His thoughts became fragmented, emotions amplified beyond control, and his sense of self fractured. In this chaotic mental state, the boy who had once been curious and hopeful was overtaken by a dangerous volatility that no one fully understood until it was too late. That night, in the privacy of the Mason home, Ethan's internal battle reached its catastrophic climax. The kitchen, the living room, every corner of the house bore witness to the unraveling of a family's safety and peace. What began as moments of confusion spiraled quickly into violent outbursts, propelled by a mixture of fear, anger, and impaired judgment. The very people who had once nurtured and cared for Ethan, his parents, Mark and Linda, became the unintended victims of his torment. The violent act itself was sudden, brutal, and beyond comprehension for those who knew Ethan. The weapon, a common household knife, transformed in that moment from a simple tool to an instrument of tragedy. The details of the night are grim and unsettling, revealing a level of chaos that overwhelmed any hope of intervention. The community, once serene and trusting, was rocked to its core by the unimaginable. A child taking the lives of his own parents. News of the crime spread rapidly, shattering the collective sense of security. Friends, neighbors, and schoolmates struggled to reconcile the boy they had seen just days before with the perpetrator of such horror. Questions flooded conversations, many grappling with disbelief and searching desperately for answers to an unfathomable act. How could a child so young, with his whole life ahead of him, commit a crime so devastating? What unseen forces had pushed Ethan to the edge of reason and morality? This question haunted the community and law enforcement alike. Investigators dug deep into Ethan's background, his mental health, and the environment that shaped him. They sought to understand the convergence of addiction, emotional neglect, and psychological distress that culminated in the night's tragedy. The case revealed painful realities about the fragility of youth, the destructive power of addiction, and the consequences of unaddressed mental health issues. For the Reed family's neighbors, the incident was a jarring reminder of how quickly life could change. The street where children once played freely became a somber place, shadowed by loss and grief. The memory of Mark and Linda, parents who had strived to raise their son with love despite overwhelming challenges, was now intertwined with the tragedy that took them from the world far too soon. The local school community was left reeling. Teachers and classmates who had seen Ethan struggle with absences and changes in behavior now faced the stark reality of his actions. Counselors and mental health professionals worked tirelessly to support students and staff, grappling with the trauma and shock that rippled through their lives. The incident sparked urgent conversations about the need for early intervention and support systems for students battling addiction and emotional distress. Law enforcement and social services confronted the complexity of handling a case involving a minor accused of such severe violence. The balance between justice, rehabilitation, and understanding became a difficult tightrope to walk. Experts in juvenile psychology were called upon to assess Ethan's mental state and capacity to comprehend the gravity of his action. This process underscored the broader societal challenges in addressing youth violence, addiction, and trauma with compassion and effectiveness. The tragedy also cast a spotlight on the systemic gaps in recognizing and responding to youth addiction and mental health crises. Ethan's descent had been marked by warning signs, missed school days, escalating conflicts, withdrawal. But the resources and support needed to intervene effectively had not been sufficient. The case ignited discussions on improving community outreach, increasing access to mental health care, and providing families with tools to navigate the complexities of adolescent addiction. Beyond the immediate pain and sorrow, the night's events became a somber catalyst for change. The community rallied around efforts to raise awareness, improve support networks, and advocate for policies aimed at preventing similar tragedies. Town meetings, support groups, and educational programs were established, all fueled by the collective desire to heal and to protect future generations from similar fates. Ethan's story remains a haunting reminder of the fragile line between childhood innocence and the destructive forces that can consume it. It calls attention to the urgent need for vigilance, understanding, and timely intervention. The devastating loss of Mark and Linda Reed is a stark testament to the consequences of addiction and emotional turmoil left unchecked in the lives of young people. This tragic night also serves as a powerful message about the importance of community, communication, and compassion. It compels families, educators, healthcare providers, and policymakers to work together to create environments where children struggling with addiction and pain can find the support and care they need before reaching a breaking point. Ultimately, the story of that fateful night in Ohio is a call to remember that behind every statistic, every headline, there is a human life, a life that deserves hope, help, and the chance to heal. The tragedy challenges us all to recognize the silent battles faced by many youths and to respond with the urgency and empathy necessary to prevent history from repeating itself. After the crime, the haze that had clouded Ethan Reed's mind began to lift, though the clarity it brought was devastating. Emerging from the fog of intoxication, he was confronted with the unimaginable truth of his actions. The sharp reality pierced through the remnants of confusion, forcing him to face the consequences of what he had done. The weight of this realization was crushing, an unbearable burden that settled heavily on his young shoulder. Though his mind struggled to comprehend the enormity of his deed, there was no denying the irreversible damage that had been wrought that night. This awakening was not a simple moment of awareness, but the beginning of a long, torturous journey, one that would isolate Ethan in ways he had never known. The boy who had once sought escape found himself trapped in the inescapable reality of guilt and remorse. His emotions became a maelstrom of despair, regret, and fear, swirling relentlessly within him. The clarity that came with sobriety revealed the chasm between who he had been and the irreversible consequences of his violence. This fracture was more than a personal tragedy. It marked the start of a lonely passage through a world now forever altered. As the shock of his actions sank in, Ethan was overwhelmed by a sense of isolation unlike anything he had experienced before. The people who once filled his life, the warmth of family, the familiarity of community, were suddenly distant, unreachable. The enormity of what he had done created an invisible wall, separating him from the world that had once seemed full of possibilities. In this solitude, Ethan wrestled with profound questions about identity, morality, and redemption. The boy's innocence had been shattered, replaced by the heavy cloak of responsibility for a crime that defied understanding. The remorse that gripped Ethan was not fleeting. It was an all-consuming force that haunted every moment. He was burdened not only by the knowledge of his parents' deaths, but by the recognition of the pain he had inflicted on those who loved him and the broader community. Memories of past arguments, moments of love and laughter, and the sharp contrast of violence filled his mind, creating a relentless cycle of self-reproach. This emotional torment became a constant companion, shadowing his every thought and action. At the same time, the boy faced the harsh realities of the legal and social consequences awaiting him. The justice system's gaze was unforgiving, scrutinizing a child whose actions were far beyond what most would expect at such a young age. The complexity of holding a minor accountable for such a grave crime introduced difficult questions about punishment, rehabilitation, and the possibility of forgiveness. Ethan's path was now intertwined with courtrooms, assessments, and judgments that would determine the course of his future. Behind the public scrutiny, Ethan's internal struggle was marked by a profound loneliness. He faced not only external condemnation, but the internal battle to understand himself and come to terms with his actions. The boy who once sought relief in substances now sought solace in introspection, though the path was arduous and fraught with pain. His remorse was a double-edged sword, both a sign of humanity and a source of relentless anguish. The community, too, felt the reverberations of that night. Friends, neighbors, and classmates grappled with the shock and sorrow, many struggling to reconcile the boy they knew with the tragedy he had wrought. The loss of Mark and Linda Reed left a wound that would not easily heal, and Ethan's awakening to his crime deepened the complexity of communal grief. His story became a focal point for discussions about addiction, mental health, and youth violence, highlighting the need for greater understanding and support. This period following the crime revealed the profound importance of empathy and comprehensive care in the aftermath of trauma. Ethan's journey through guilt and remorse underscored the necessity of psychological support for young offenders, especially those caught in the web of addiction and emotional distress. It illuminated the delicate balance between justice and rehabilitation, a challenge faced by families, communities, and legal systems alike. Ethan's painful awakening also served as a stark reminder of the consequences of addiction left unchecked and untreated. The substances that once offered escape became chains binding him to a path of destruction and despair. His story implores society to recognize the critical need for early intervention, mental health resources, and compassionate outreach to prevent such tragedies from occurring. In facing his actions, Ethan was forced to confront the depths of human fragility and the capacity for remorse. His awakening was not only a moment of reckoning, but the start of a hopeful, though difficult, journey toward healing. The road ahead would demand courage, resilience, and the willingness to seek forgiveness, both from others and from himself. This narrative compels us to look beyond the surface of criminal acts, to understand the human stories beneath, and to approach the complex intersection of addiction, youth, and violence with compassion. Ethan's experience highlights the necessity of community support, therapeutic intervention, and a justice system that acknowledges the nuances of childhood trauma. Ultimately, Ethan Reed's awakening after the crime is a tragic chapter that underscores the devastating consequences of addiction and emotional neglect. It challenges us to foster environments where young people can find help before despair drives them to irreversible acts. His story is a somber call for vigilance, empathy, and proactive care, reminding us all of the fragile line between innocence lost and the possibility of redemption. Following the devastating night that forever altered the lives of the Reed family and the entire community, local authorities sprang into immediate action. What unfolded was a full-scale investigation, meticulous and exhaustive, aimed at unraveling the sequence of events that had led a 12-year-old boy to commit an unthinkable act. The small town, still grappling with shock and grief, watched as law enforcement, social services, and forensic experts worked tirelessly to piece together the fragmented story behind the tragedy. The investigation began with the immediate response to the emergency call, the arrival of officers, and the securing of the scene. From the outset, investigators knew they were dealing with a complex and heartbreaking case that demanded sensitivity as well as rigor. The physical evidence collected within the Reed home painted a chilling picture, but it was the contextual details that would prove essential in understanding how such a catastrophe had come to pass. Interviews with neighbors, friends, and school personnel helped construct a timeline of Ethan's recent behavior and mental state, providing crucial insight into the pressures and struggles that had gone largely unnoticed or unaddressed. As the layers of the story were uncovered, it became clear that Ethan's descent into addiction and despair had been gradual but relentless. Each missed school day, each argument at home, and each secretive escape into the world of substance use was a stepping stone toward the night's tragic climax. Authorities sought to understand not only the specifics of the crime, but the broader context of Ethan's life, the vulnerabilities, the failures of support, and the warning signs that had been overlooked. This comprehensive approach was necessary not just for legal purposes, but to shed light on how such a tragedy might be prevented in the future. The town itself found itself caught in the throes of collective mourning. Mark and Linda Reed, well-known and respected community members, were remembered not just as victims of violence, but as loving parents who had fought valiantly to help their son. Memorials were held, neighbors gathered to offer condolences, and local leaders expressed a shared sense of loss that transcended personal connections. The tragedy resonated deeply, touching everyone who had known the family or understood the precarious nature of youth struggling with addiction and mental health challenges. Ethan's story quickly became emblematic of a larger social issue, the devastating impact of drug addiction on families, especially those with young members who are particularly vulnerable. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate pain of loss, exposing fractures in the community's ability to support at-risk youth and their families. Discussions sprang up in town halls, schools, and social service agencies, each grappling with how to better identify and assist children like Ethan before their struggles culminate in tragedy. The investigation also underscored the pressing need for robust prevention strategies and support systems aimed at vulnerable youth. The realities of addiction are complex, often intertwined with mental health, socioeconomic factors, and family dynamics. Authorities, in collaboration with health professionals and educators, began advocating for increased resources dedicated to early intervention programs, addiction education, and accessible counseling services. The goal was to create a safety net that could catch children before they fell too far, providing pathways toward recovery and resilience. For many in the community, the Reed tragedy was a painful awakening, a call to action against the silence and stigma that often surround addiction and mental health. It challenged residents to rethink how they viewed and supported families in crisis, and how schools and social services responded to the needs of struggling youth. The story of Ethan's fall and the subsequent loss of his parents illuminated the gaps in existing systems and the urgency of bridging them. Law enforcement agencies also reflected on the complexities of handling cases involving minors who commit serious offenses under the influence of addiction. The investigation's findings contributed to a broader conversation about juvenile justice, rehabilitation, and the importance of addressing the root causes of youth crime. The hope was to find a balance between accountability and compassion, recognizing that early intervention and therapeutic support are key to preventing recidivism and fostering healing. Throughout the investigation, the community's resilience was tested. Friends, neighbors, and local organizations banded together to offer support to those affected by the tragedy. Counseling services were made available to students and families, and efforts were made to raise awareness about the dangers of adolescent substance abuse. These collective actions demonstrated the town's determination to learn from the pain and to work toward a safer, more supportive environment for all children. Ethan's story became a catalyst for change, inspiring local leaders and advocates to push for policy reforms and enhanced funding for mental health and addiction services. Educational campaigns were launched to inform parents and caregivers about the signs of substance abuse and how to intervene effectively. Schools implemented programs designed to foster emotional well-being and resilience among students, aiming to equip them with the tools needed to navigate challenges without turning to harmful coping mechanisms. The investigation also revealed the importance of community vigilance and the role that neighbors and peers can play in recognizing warning signs. Encouraging open communication and reducing the stigma around addiction and mental health were seen as vital steps in creating a culture where children feel safe to seek help. The collective hope was that through these efforts, tragedies like that which befell the Reed family could be prevented. In the end, the investigation into that fateful night was more than just a legal pursuit. It was a profound exploration of how addiction, family dynamics, and community support intersect. It highlighted the devastating consequences when these elements fail to align in protecting vulnerable youth. The lessons learned from Ethan Reed's story continue to influence the community's approach to prevention, intervention, and healing. This chapter in the town's history serves as a somber reminder of the fragility of youth and the urgent need for comprehensive support systems. The tragic loss of Mark and Linda Reed is etched deeply in the collective memory, but it also fuels an ongoing commitment to protect children and families from similar pain. Through awareness, compassion, and coordinated action, the community strives to honor their memory by building a future where young lives are safeguarded and given every chance to flourish. The investigation brought to light not only the heartbreaking circumstances of the crime, but also the resilience and unity of a community determined to heal. It stands as a testament to the power of coming together in the face of tragedy, transforming grief into hope and determination. The story of Ethan Reed and his family remains a powerful call to action, one that challenges all of us to confront the realities of addiction and youth vulnerability and to work tirelessly toward prevention and care. As the town moves forward, the echoes of that tragic night continue to serve as both a warning and a motivation. The hope is that through continued vigilance, education, and support, no other family will have to endure such loss, and no other child will be left to navigate the darkness alone. The legacy of the investigation is one of learning, growth, and an unwavering commitment to protect the future of all children. Ethan Reed's story is a stark and sobering example of the fragile nature of youth and the devastating consequences that can arise when addiction and poor choices take hold early in life. What began as a typical childhood, full of hope and potential, was tragically derailed by a combination of vulnerability, negative influences, and the overwhelming grip of substance abuse. This narrative serves as a powerful reminder that the path from innocence to devastation can be alarmingly short when warning signs go unnoticed or unaddressed, and when support systems fail to intervene in time. The unraveling of Ethan's life was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual descent marked by missed opportunities and growing isolation. Addiction, particularly in young people, can stealthily erode the foundations of stability, trust, and self-worth. It seeps into the daily rhythms of life, altering behaviors, distorting perceptions, and breaking down relationships. In Ethan's case, the allure of escape through drugs offered a deceptive refuge from the pain and pressures he faced, but the sanctuary soon transformed into a prison. His struggles underscore the critical need for vigilance and early intervention in the lives of vulnerable youth. Awareness is the cornerstone of prevention. Families, educators, and communities must be equipped to recognize the subtle and overt signs that a young person may be at risk. Changes in behavior, withdrawal from social activities, declining academic performance, and shifts in mood can all be indicators of deeper issues. However, recognizing these signs is only the first step. The challenge lies in responding effectively, with compassion and proactive engagement. Ethan's story reveals the consequences when those around a struggling youth are either unaware, overwhelmed, or uncertain about how to help. Compassion plays a vital role in breaking the cycle of addiction and poor choices. Stigma and judgment often discourage young people from seeking or accepting help, driving them further into secrecy and isolation. A community that responds with understanding rather than condemnation fosters an environment where youth feel safe to share their struggles and access support. Families in particular need resources and guidance to navigate the complex emotions and challenges that come with raising a child battling addiction. The Mason family's experience is a poignant reminder that love alone, while essential, may not be sufficient without the right tools and support. Proactive engagement from educators and community leaders is equally crucial. Schools serve as a front line in identifying at-risk youth, offering not only education but also social support and intervention programs. Teachers, counselors, and administrators who are trained to detect early warning signs and connect students with resources can make a profound difference. Community organizations, youth programs, and mental health services also play indispensable roles in creating networks of care. Together, these institutions form a safety net designed to catch those who might otherwise fall through the cracks. Preventing tragedies like Ethan's requires a holistic approach that addresses not just the symptoms but the underlying causes of addiction and behavioral problems. Socioeconomic factors, family dynamics, mental health, and exposure to negative influences all intertwine to shape a young person's trajectory. Effective prevention programs must be multifaceted, culturally sensitive, and tailored to meet the unique needs of individuals and community. Collaboration among families, schools, healthcare providers, and social services enhances the ability to provide comprehensive care and support. Ethan's story also highlights the importance of open communication within families. Creating a home environment where children feel heard, valued, and understood can build resilience against external pressures and internal struggles. Parents and caregivers who foster trust and encourage honest dialogue can better guide their children through difficult times. When conversations about challenges, mistakes, and emotions are normalized, young people are more likely to seek help before problems escalate. At the heart of this case lies a call for collective responsibility. Protecting children from the dangers of addiction and poor decision-making is not solely the burden of families, but a communal duty. Communities must come together to build supportive environments that nurture the physical, emotional, and psychological well-being of all youth. This includes advocating for policies that increase access to mental health services, support early intervention, and promote education on substance abuse and healthy coping mechanisms. The heartbreaking consequences of Ethan Reed's descent into addiction and violence serve as a catalyst for change. His story has inspired individuals and organizations to recommit to the mission of safeguarding young lives. It has sparked conversations about the gaps in current support systems and the urgent need to develop more effective strategies for prevention and rehabilitation. By learning from this tragedy, society gains insight into the complex realities faced by at-risk youth and the importance of empathy and action. Ultimately, Ethan's narrative is a reminder that no child's future should be defined by addiction or despair. It emphasizes the potential for recovery, healing, and transformation when timely and compassionate interventions are in place. Each effort to understand, support, and guide vulnerable youth contributes to breaking the cycle of pain and loss. The hope is that through sustained awareness, education, and community engagement, other children will be spared the fate that befell Ethan. This story challenges us all to look beyond statistics and headlines, to see the human lives behind the struggles, and to respond with urgency and care. It is a call to foster a society where every young person has the opportunity to thrive, free from the chains of addiction and destructive influences. Ethan Reed's tragic experience stands as both a warning and a beacon, illuminating the path toward a future where children are protected, nurtured, and given the chance to fulfill their true potential.